I could smell it before I saw her. My perfume. The one I'd spent 3 months saving for. The one I'd hidden in the back of my drawer wrapped in tissue paper. The one I wore only on days that mattered. It clung to Emma's skin as she stepped into the living room, her hair cascading over her shoulders in waves I'd helped curl that morning. She was wearing my dress too, the ivory one with the delicate lace sleeves. But it was the scent that made my throat tighten. "Perfect," Mum said, adjusting the camera angle. "Olivia, stand behind your sister. No, further back. We want Emma's outfit in full frame." I moved backward until my shoulder brushed the wall. Through the viewfinder, I became a shadow, a smudge of colour behind Emma's radiance. Dad knelt to check the lighting, his hand reaching out to smooth a wrinkle from Emma's sleeve. No one looked at me. No one ever did when Emma was in the room. "Smile, honey," Mum cooed, and I wasn't sure which of us she meant until Emma's laugh filled the space like bells. The camera clicked. Once, twice, 10 times. I stood motionless, my lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, wearing the scent I'd chosen as invisible armour now stolen and made more beautiful on someone else's skin. When the photo session ended, Emma brushed past me, leaving a trail of my own fragrance in her wake. "Thanks for letting me borrow it," she said, though we both knew she'd never asked. "It photographs better on me anyway." I said nothing. I'd learned that silence was safer than speaking, that disappearing was easier than fighting to be seen. I returned to my room and found the bottle on my desk. Cap off, half empty. She'd used it liberally, the way people do with things that don't belong to them, things they don't have to ration or treasure. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the remaining amber liquid. This wasn't the first time. It would never be the last. Emma took my things the way she took the light in every room, naturally, inevitably, as if the world had been arranged specifically for her comfort. And perhaps it had. She was younger by 2 years, but moved through life with the confidence of someone who'd never questioned her place in it. The photo would go on the mantel. They always did. Emma, front and centre, glowing and perfect, while I existed as an afterthought in the background, my features barely distinguishable, my presence acknowledged only by the space I occupied. I'd seen this pattern repeat itself for years. Every birthday party where my cake was smaller, every holiday card where I was positioned at the edge, every family gathering where Emma's news eclipsed mine before I'd even finished speaking. I remembered my high school graduation. I'd been valedictorian, had earned a full scholarship to a prestigious university. Emma had been 15, still struggling with basic algebra. But at the celebration dinner, Dad had spent 30 minutes discussing Emma's potential, her creative spark, her promising future. My achievements were acknowledged with a brief "proud of you" before the conversation shifted back to Emma's latest art project. I'd swallowed the disappointment then, just as I swallowed it now. I'd become an expert at making myself smaller, at rationing my own needs, at celebrating crumbs of attention as if they were feasts. That night I lay awake and felt something inside me grow quiet. Not angry, not hurt, just quiet. It was the kind of silence that comes when you've screamed into a void so many times that your voice finally gives out, when you realise that no amount of hoping will make people see you differently. I was 23 years old, and I'd spent my entire life as an accessory to Emma's story, a supporting character who existed only to make her shine brighter by comparison. I'd graduated from university 2 years ago with honours in art history. I'd worked 2 jobs to support myself, because Mum and Dad had redirected most of my college fund to pay for Emma's expensive art supplies and portfolio courses. I'd come home this weekend to celebrate Emma's acceptance into a prestigious design programme, the same programme I'd been rejected from 5 years earlier, because, as Dad had gently suggested, maybe I should choose something more practical and leave the creative fields to Emma. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my childhood nurturing Emma's talents, helping her with projects, teaching her techniques I'd learned, building her confidence. And now she was living the dream I'd set aside because there wasn't room in this family for two artists, and I'd learned early that when there's only space for one, it would never be me. I closed my eyes and let the numbness spread through my chest like winter frost. It didn't hurt anymore. That was somehow worse than the hurting. The next morning, I woke to shouting downstairs, Emma's voice sharp with panic. "She's not breathing! Mom, she's not breathing!" I tried to open my eyes, but my eyelids were too heavy. I tried to move my hand, but my arm remained limp against the sheets. Somewhere far away, I heard Mum crying, heard Dad's voice breaking as he called for an ambulance. I wanted to tell them I was fine, that this was just exhaustion, just the accumulated weight of years of invisible wounds finally pressing down. But my body wouldn't respond. My lungs moved shallowly, mechanically. In the growing darkness behind my closed eyes, I understood with crystal clarity what was happening. This was ending, not dramatically, not with intention, but simply because my body had finally learned what my mind had known for years, that I was tired of being the shadow, tired of taking up space only to be erased. The paramedics came. I heard their urgent voices, felt hands on my wrist checking for a pulse. Someone said something about heart failure, about stress-induced cardiomyopathy, about how young I was for this to happen. Emma was crying, her voice high and thin. Mum kept saying my name over and over as if repetition could bring me back. Too late, I thought distantly. You're finally saying my name, but it's too late. The sounds faded, the darkness deepened, and then there was nothing at all. Just a gentle dissolving, like perfume dissipating in the air until not even the memory of the scent remains. I opened my eyes to morning light streaming through familiar curtains. My room, my teenage room, with the posters I'd taken down years ago still hanging on the walls, with the desk lamp I'd replaced sitting exactly where it used to be. I sat up slowly, my hands smooth and smaller, my body lighter. The digital clock on my nightstand read 7:14 a.m, and beneath it, the date glowed in red numbers, 5 years earlier. I was 18 again. The memories came flooding back with perfect clarity. Every moment of the life I'd just left, every photograph where I'd stood in the background, every time Emma had borrowed my things without asking, every family dinner where my achievements went unmentioned while her smallest accomplishments earned applause. I remembered my graduation being overshadowed by Emma's school play. I remembered working 2 jobs while Emma's tuition was paid in full. I remembered dying in that room down the hall, my heart giving out from the exhaustion of being invisible. But now I was here, given something I didn't understand and hadn't asked for. A second chance. Another beginning. I stood and walked to the mirror, seeing my younger face staring back, and in my eyes I recognized something that hadn't been there before. Awareness. Knowledge. The bone-deep understanding that comes only from reaching the end of something and seeing it whole. I wouldn't waste it this time. I wouldn't disappear again. The bottle of perfume sat on my dresser, still full, still sealed in its box. I remembered this day with perfect clarity. It was the weekend before my high school graduation, when Mum had planned an elaborate photo shoot to commemorate Emma's acceptance to a prestigious arts program. In my first life, I'd stood in the background of those photos wearing this perfume, and Emma had asked to try it afterward. I'd said yes, desperate for any connection, any acknowledgement, and she'd taken the bottle back to her room, where it had become hers more than mine. Not this time. I took the bottle and placed it in my bag, along with a few other personal items, my journal, my sketchbook, the good earrings Grandma had given me that Emma had borrowed and never returned in my first life. Then I went downstairs, where Mum was already setting up her camera equipment in the living room. Emma sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, her hair still messy from sleep. "Olivia," Mum called without looking up, "can you help your sister get ready? I want to start shooting in an hour." I have plans, I said simply. Mum's head snapped up. Emma stopped scrolling. They both stared at me as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. In my first life, I'd never said no to them. I'd moulded myself around their needs, their schedules, their assumptions. I'd been the reliable one, the helpful one, the one who could always be counted on to sacrifice. What plans? Mum asked, confusion flickering across her face. Personal ones. I didn't elaborate. I didn't apologise. I didn't offer to reschedule or compromise. I simply stated my reality and let it stand. The silence that followed felt electric. But, Olivia, this is important, Mum said, her voice taking on that tone of gentle manipulation I knew so well. It's Emma's big day. We need you here. You need someone to hold the reflector and adjust Emma's dress, I replied calmly. You don't need me specifically. Emma is 16 years old. She can manage her own outfit. Emma's mouth fell open slightly. In my first life, she'd been accustomed to my assistance, had come to expect my labour as naturally as she expected the sun to rise. The idea that I might refuse had never occurred to her. Who's going to do her hair? Mum pressed. Emma can do her own hair, or you can do it, Mum. I'm sure you remember how. I walked back upstairs, showered, and dressed in clothes I actually liked. Simple black jeans and a soft grey sweater, nothing borrowed, nothing chosen to fade into the background. I dabbed a single drop of perfume on my wrists, barely enough to register, and left the house while Mum was still calling after me, her voice pitched with bewilderment and a hint of outrage. I spent the day at the library, then at a small cafe downtown where no one knew me. I sketched in a notebook, something I'd loved. Once before, I'd learnt to make myself smaller, quieter, less threatening to Emma's light. The act of drawing felt like remembering a language I'd forced myself to forget. My hand moved across the paper with confidence I didn't remember possessing, creating lines and shadows that pleased me in ways I'd stopped allowing myself to feel. A woman at the next table leaned over. "That's beautiful," she said, gesturing to my sketch. "Are you an art student?" "Not yet," I replied, "but I will be." In my first life, I'd studied art history because Dad had convinced me that practicing art was impractical, that I should appreciate creativity from a safe academic distance. I'd loved the coursework, but had always felt like I was viewing life through glass, analysing other people's visions instead of creating my own. Not this time. When I returned home that evening, the photo shoot was over. The living room smelled stale, the equipment already packed away. Emma appeared in the hallway as I climbed the stairs. Her hair was messy, her makeup smudged. The photos, I imagined, had not gone as well as planned. "Where were you?" she demanded. "Mom needed you." "She needed someone to make things easier," I said calmly. "That's not the same as needing me specifically." "You're being weird." "Maybe." "No, really weird. Selfish. We had a family obligation and you just left." I paused on the stairs and looked at her fully. In my first life, I would have apologised, would have felt crushing guilt for disappointing them. But standing here with the weight of my future memories, I saw the situation clearly. This wasn't a family obligation. This was them expecting my unpaid labour to facilitate Emma's spotlight moment. "Emma," I said carefully, "when was the last time anyone in this family attended something important to me?" She blinked. "What?" "My art show last month, the one at school. Did you come?" "Oh, I had rehearsal." "My debate tournament in February. Did anyone come?" "Mum had a headache." "My academic awards ceremony last week. Did anyone come?" She was silent now, her expression shifting from indignation to something more uncertain. "Family obligations go both ways," I said gently. "But, for some reason, mine never seemed to count." I walked past her into my room and closed the door. Through the wall, I heard her complaining to Mum, heard Mum's uncertain responses. They didn't understand this version of me. Good. I barely understood it myself, but I knew with absolute certainty that I would not spend this life making myself convenient for other people's comfort. Over the following weeks, I made small, deliberate changes. When Emma asked to borrow my clothes, I said no. When Mum asked me to rearrange my schedule for another of Emma's events, I politely declined. When Dad suggested I apply to the local university so I could stay close to home and help with the family, I applied instead to schools 3 states away, schools with strong studio art programs. Each refusal felt like learning to breathe again. Each boundary felt like reclaiming territory I'd abandoned in my first life. My parents didn't know how to respond. They'd built their understanding of our family around certain unspoken rules. Emma was the star, I was the support system, and everyone played their roles without complaint. My sudden unwillingness to follow the script left them confused and slightly hurt, as if I'd betrayed an agreement I'd never actually made. "I don't understand what's gotten into you," Mum said one evening at dinner. "You've always been so helpful, so considerate. Now you're acting like we're asking you for unreasonable things." "You are asking for unreasonable things?" I replied, cutting my chicken with deliberate precision. "You're asking me to consistently prioritise Emma's needs over my own, to sacrifice my time, my resources, my energy and my autonomy so that she can have an easier path. And you're framing it as family obligation when really it's just habit." Dad set down his fork. "Olivia, that's not fair." "Isn't it? When Emma wanted art supplies, you took money from my college fund. When Emma needed help with her portfolio, I spent weeks working with her instead of developing my own skills. When Emma has an event, my schedule is expected to bend around it. But when I have something important, there's always a reason why no one can make it." "We didn't realise you felt this way," Mum said, her voice small. "I tried to tell you, multiple times, but my feelings were always less important than Emma's feelings, so eventually I stopped expressing them." Emma had been silent throughout this exchange, pushing food around her plate. Now she looked up, her eyes bright with tears. "So you hate me? Is that what this is?" "I don't hate you," I said truthfully. "I love you, but I'm done setting myself on fire to keep you warm." The metaphor hung in the air. Emma's tears spilled over and Mum reached out to comfort her. Dad's jaw tightened, his expression caught between frustration and reluctant understanding. I excused myself from the table and returned to my room, where I worked on my portfolio late into the night. But I noticed something else too. Without me to manage the small details of Emma's life, she began to struggle. She missed appointments because no one reminded her. She wore mismatched outfits because I wasn't there to offer advice. She arrived late to her own events because she'd never learned to manage her time when someone else had always done it for her. Her grades, which I'd helped maintain through late-night tutoring sessions, began to slip. I didn't take pleasure in her struggles, but I didn't rush to fix them either. She was 16 years old. It was time she learned to manage her own life. My guidance counsellor called me into her office, 3 weeks before graduation. "Olivia, I've reviewed your college applications. You've applied to some extremely competitive art programs." "Yes." "Your father mentioned you were planning to study art history at the local university." My father was mistaken. She studied me for a long moment. "Your portfolio is exceptional. I had no idea you were this talented. Why haven't you been in any of our advanced art classes?" "Because Emma is in those classes and my parents thought it would be better if we pursued different paths." Her expression shifted to something like recognition. "I see. Well, for what it's worth, I think you've made excellent choices. These programs would be lucky to have you." 2 months later, I received my acceptance letters. I'd been admitted to 4 prestigious art schools, including the one that had rejected me in my first life. The scholarship offers were generous, full tuition at 2 of them, significant aid at the others. I showed the letters to my parents at dinner. Mum read them with wide eyes. Dad's expression was complicated, pride mixed with something that looked like guilt. "This is wonderful, honey," Mum said, but her voice wavered. "But these schools are so far away. Don't you want to stay closer to home?" "No," I said simply. I don't. Emma, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up. You're really leaving? Just like that? Just like that? But what about... She trailed off, seeming to realize mid-sentence that she'd been about to ask what about her, what about the help I'd always provided, what about the role I'd always played. What about what, Emma? I asked gently. She looked down. Nothing. Congratulations. The perfume incident came 3 months later, during the summer before I left for college. Mum had arranged another photo session, this time for Emma's portfolio submission to a modelling agency. I watched from the kitchen as Emma laid out her outfit choices, as Mum fussed with the lighting, as Dad set up the backdrop in the living room. Emma appeared in the doorway of my room without knocking. Can I borrow that perfume? She asked, her tone casual, as if she were asking about the weather. The one you got for graduation? No, I said, not looking up from my book. Come on, Olivia, don't be petty. It's just for today. It's mine. She huffed, frustrated. Usamu, you're being so selfish lately. I don't know what's wrong with you. It's just perfume. You used to share everything with me. I set down my book and met her eyes. I used to do a lot of things that weren't good for me, and nothing is wrong with me. I've just stopped pretending I don't exist. What's that supposed to mean? It means my things are mine. It means I'm allowed to have boundaries. It means you need to learn to ask before taking and to accept when the answer is no. Use your own perfume, Emma. I don't have one that works for photos. Then buy one. You have an allowance. You have birthday money. You have all the resources I never had because Mum and Dad spend 3 times as much on you as they do on me. Her face flushed. That's not true. It is true. I've been keeping track. Last year alone, they spent $4,000 on your art supplies and portfolio courses. They spent $600 on me, total, and half of that was for my birthday. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She couldn't deny the math. Go use your own things, Emma, I said, returning to my book. Build your own life. Stop trying to wear mine. She left, slamming the door. I heard her complaining to Mum in the hallway, heard Mum's gentle voice trying to placate her. But I didn't come out. I didn't apologise. I returned to my book, and when the photo shoot began, I stayed in my room. Later that evening, I passed by Emma's room and saw her sitting at her vanity, staring at the photos on her phone with a strange expression. Without my perfume, without the particular styling I used to provide, without my invisible labour, the images looked different. Still beautiful, but somehow hollow, missing the particular magic that had made her previous photos special. She didn't understand why yet, didn't realise how much of her presentation had been built on the foundation of my quiet support, my aesthetic sensibility, my uncredited contributions. But she was beginning to sense it. I could see the confusion in her face, the first cracks in her certainty that she'd built her success entirely on her own merit. I started college that fall at a school where no one knew me as Emma's sister, where I could simply be Olivia. The campus was beautiful, tucked into a small city known for its arts community. I declared a major in studio art with a focus on mixed media, chose courses that fascinated me, made friends who saw me first and my family connections never. My roommate was a photography student named Jessica, who had a collection of vintage perfume bottles on her desk. We bonded over scent, over the way fragrance could tell a story or evoke a memory. She introduced me to a boutique perfume shop near campus, a tiny place run by an elderly woman who mixed custom blends. I started working there part-time, learning about notes and composition, about how top notes fade to reveal the heart, how base notes linger longest on the skin. I discovered I had an exceptional nose, could identify individual components in complex fragrances, could suggest combinations that surprised and delighted customers. The work felt like coming home to a part of myself I hadn't known existed. I began creating my own blends, experimental compositions that smelled like memory and intention. I wore a different scent every week, learning my own preferences, understanding how fragrance interacted with my skin chemistry. I discovered I had good taste, better than I'd realised. Not just in perfume, but in everything. Professors commented on my artistic vision, classmates asked for my feedback on their work. I joined critique groups, entered student shows, won a small prize for a mixed media piece that incorporated scent into visual art. Emma called sometimes, usually when she needed something. I was polite but distant. I answered her questions but didn't offer solutions. When she complained about her life, I listened without jumping in to fix things. The calls became less frequent. Mum called more often, her voice tinged with worry. "Are you okay, honey? You seem so far away." "I'm close to myself," I told her. "That's different from being far from you." She didn't understand, but I hadn't expected her to. Some things couldn't be explained, only lived. Some distances were necessary for survival. During winter break of my sophomore year, I came home for Christmas. The house looked the same, but the dynamics had shifted in ways both subtle and profound. Emma had started at a local college and still lived at home. She seemed smaller, somehow, less luminous, as if the constant spotlight had begun to dim without someone to maintain it. Her grades were mediocre. Her art portfolio was good, but not exceptional. She'd been rejected from several prestigious programs and had settled for a state school nearby. On Christmas morning, we gathered in the living room for the annual photo. Mum set up her camera in its usual spot, adjusted the lighting, positioned Dad and Emma on the couch. Then she looked at me, standing near the doorway. "Olivia, come sit with your sister." I walked over, but this time I didn't fade into the background. I sat beside Emma, my posture straight, my expression calm. I wore a deep burgundy dress I'd chosen myself, and at my pulse points, I'd applied a custom perfume blend I'd created at the shop. Roses and oud, and something darkly green that smelled like a forest after rain. Complex, unforgettable, entirely my own. Emma leaned slightly away from me. "What is that scent?" she asked, her nose wrinkling. "Mine," I said simply. "It's so strong, so different from what you used to wear." I used to wear things that wouldn't offend anyone. Now I wear what I like. The camera clicked. When Mom showed us the preview on the screen, I saw something different than before. Emma still looked beautiful, but she no longer eclipsed me. We were two separate people occupying the same frame, each distinct, each visible. And for the first time in any family photo I could remember, I was fully present, not washed out, not pushed to the side, not fading into the background. Mum stared at the image for a long moment. That's lovely," she said, and her voice carried a note of surprise, as if she'd just noticed something that had been there all along, but she'd never bothered to see. Dad cleared his throat. "You look good, Olivia, happy, different." "I am different," I said. "I'm the version of myself I was always supposed to be." That afternoon, while Emma was out with friends, I found Mum in the kitchen preparing dinner. She was chopping vegetables with unusual intensity, her movements sharp and distracted. "Can I help?" I asked. She looked up and I saw her eyes were red. "Did we really fail you that badly?" she asked quietly. "Your father and I have been talking about what you said last summer, about the money we spent, the attention we gave Emma, the way we made you responsible for her needs. Were we really that blind?" I considered lying, softening the truth. But I'd spent too much of my first life protecting other people from uncomfortable realities. "Yes," I said, "you were." She set down the knife and gripped the counter. "I thought I was being a good mother. I thought I was supporting both of you." "You were supporting Emma. I was just there. background furniture, the reliable daughter who didn't need attention because she never complained. But you did complain, didn't you? And we didn't listen. You didn't want to listen, because listening would have required changing, and it was easier to keep things as they were. She was crying now, tears sliding down her face into the pile of chopped carrots. "I'm sorry, Olivia. I'm so sorry." I walked over and put my hand on her shoulder. "I know you are, and I appreciate that you can see it now. But sorry doesn't undo the years of being invisible. It doesn't give me back the childhood where I mattered as much as Emma." "What can I do? How can I fix this?" "You can't fix it, Mum. Some things, once broken, can't be restored to what they were. But you can do better going forward. You can see me. You can stop asking me to sacrifice myself for Emma's comfort. You can treat us as equals." She nodded, wiping her eyes. We stood together in the kitchen, the silence heavy with everything that had been and everything that could never be recovered. The turning point came in the spring of my junior year. Emma was preparing for an important audition, some arts showcase that could open doors for her career. She called me 3 times before I finally answered. "I need your help," she said without preamble. "The showcase is next week and nothing feels right. My outfits look wrong, my photos aren't working, my portfolio is missing something and I don't know what. Can you look at it? Please?" "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice neutral. "Just your eye. Your opinion. You always know what's missing." "Emma, I'm 3 states away. I have my own final projects due. I can't just drop everything and come home." "Can I send you photos then? Can you give me feedback remotely?" In my first life, I would have dropped everything. I would have stayed up all night reviewing her work, would have poured my energy into fixing her problems, would have given her my best ideas wrapped up as gentle suggestions, and she would have taken it all without acknowledgement, would have used my vision as her own. "No," I said. "I have my own work to do." "Olivia, please, this is really important. This showcase could change everything for me." "So is my life. So is my work. So is my time." Silence stretched between us. I could hear her breathing, could sense her confusion transforming into something sharper. Frustration, maybe, or the first stirrings of real awareness. "You've changed," she said finally. You're not you anymore. You're not my sister anymore." "Actually," I replied, "I'm more myself than I've ever been. And I am your sister. But I'm not your unpaid consultant, your stylist, your art director, or your emotional support system. I'm your sister. That's a relationship, not a job description." "I don't understand why you're being like this." "Because I spent my entire childhood and adolescence making your life easier at the expense of my own growth. Because I gave you so much of myself that there was barely anything left for me. Because I almost died from the exhaustion of being invisible. And I won't do it again, Emma. I can't." "You almost... what? What are you talking about?" I realised my mistake immediately. She didn't know about my first life, about the death and rebirth, about the future that had already happened. "Nothing. Forget I said that." "No, tell me. What do you mean you almost died?" "I mean that giving everything to other people and nothing to yourself is a kind of death. A slow one, and I'm not willing to die that way anymore." I hung up before she could respond. My hand trembled slightly as I set down the phone, but the trembling came from power, not fear. I had drawn a boundary. I had protected my space. I had refused to disappear. Emma didn't call again, but 3 weeks later I received a text from Mum. "Can you come home next weekend? Family dinner, please, it's important." I almost said no, but something in the phrasing, in the simple please, made me reconsider. I arrived on Saturday evening. The house smelled like Mum's cooking, warm and familiar. Emma's car sat in the driveway, and I steeled myself as I walked through the front door. They were all in the dining room, Mum, Dad, Emma. The table was set carefully with the good dishes we usually only used for holidays. They looked up as I entered, and I saw something in their faces I'd never seen before. Not quite guilt, but something adjacent to it. Recognition, perhaps. The dawning understanding that I'd been there all along, and they'd looked past me so consistently that my absence had become more noticeable than my presence had ever been. "Olivia," Mum said, standing up, "thank you for coming." We sat down to dinner. The conversation felt stilted at first, everyone uncertain how to navigate this new dynamic. Emma picked at her food, her eyes flickering toward me periodically. Finally, she set down her fork. "I didn't get the showcase spot," she said quietly. "They said my portfolio was technically proficient, but lacked authenticity. That's the word they used. Authenticity. They said it felt derivative, like I was copying someone else's aesthetic without understanding what made it work." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. Not sorry that she'd failed, but sorry that she was hurting. They weren't the same thing. "I've been thinking about what you said," Emma continued, her voice small, "about how I never bothered to know who you were. You're right, I didn't. I just assumed you'd always be there, helping with everything, making things work. And when you stopped," she trailed off, her expression complex. "Nothing felt right anymore. Nothing worked the same way. And I realised that half of what I thought was my own talent was actually you, your eye, your aesthetic, your uncredited contributions to my success." "That's because I was doing more than you realised," I said gently, "and you were taking more than you understood. Not maliciously, but you were taking nonetheless." Mum cleared her throat. "We all were," she said, her voice thick. "I've been looking through old photos, really looking at them, and I see it now. How often you're in the background, how little space you take up, how rarely we focus on you. I thought I was being a good mother to both of you, but I was only really seeing one of you. I was raising Emma and managing you." Dad reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. His palm was warm, his grip uncertain. "We're sorry, Olivia. We should have seen you better. We should have celebrated you more. We should have protected your resources the way we protected Emma's. We failed you, and I don't know if we can ever make that right." The apology settled over the table like dust in sunlight, visible, real, but also revealing how much time had passed, how much damage had accumulated. I appreciated it, but I also knew it couldn't undo the years I'd spent invisible. Some things, once lost, couldn't be recovered. Some hurts, once inflicted, left permanent scars. "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate that you can see it now. That matters." "Can we—" Emma hesitated. "Can we start over? Not forget everything, but maybe try to do better. I want to know who you are. The real you. Not the you who existed to support me, but the actual person you are when you're not trying to make yourself smaller." I considered her question carefully. In my first life, I would have said yes immediately, would have been so grateful for the crumbs of acknowledgement that I'd have given everything again. But I died once from making myself too small, and I'd been reborn into the knowledge that my worth didn't depend on their recognition. "We can try," I said finally, "but it has to be different. I'm not going to go back to being invisible. I'm not going to sacrifice my space so everyone else can be comfortable. I'm not going to be the family's emotional labour provider or Emma's unpaid creative consultant. If we rebuild this, it has to be on equal footing." "I understand," Emma said. "I don't want you to go back either. I want to actually know my sister. I want to earn a real relationship with you, not just assume I have one because we share DNA." Over the following months, we learned to exist in each other's lives without me disappearing into hers. It wasn't perfect. Old patterns tried to reassert themselves. Mum's instinct to focus on Emma, Emma's unconscious assumption that I'd handle the details, Dad's tendency to overlook my accomplishments while celebrating Emma's minor victories. But now when it happened, I spoke up. I reminded them I was there. I insisted on being seen. And slowly, incrementally, they learned to see me. I graduated with honours from my art programme and was accepted into a prestigious MFA programme in New York. My thesis show had been well received, and several galleries had expressed interest in my work. I'd created a series of mixed media pieces that incorporated scent, visual art that engaged multiple senses, that told stories through both image and fragrance. Emma came to my graduation, sat in the audience with our parents, and cheered when I crossed the stage. Afterward, she hugged me tightly. "I'm proud of you," she said. "I should have said that more. I should have seen how amazing you are, how talented, how strong." "Thank you," I replied. "I hope you keep seeing it." "I will, I promise." On my last night at home, before the move to New York, Emma appeared in my doorway as I was packing. She held something in her hands, a small wrapped box. "I got you something," she said, offering it to me, "for your new apartment." I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a beautiful crystal perfume bottle, empty, waiting to be filled. Engraved on the bottom in delicate script was my name, Olivia. "I thought you could put your favourite scent in it," Emma said softly. "Something completely yours. Something I can't copy, something that's just for you." I looked up at her and saw genuine emotion in her eyes. Regret, yes, but also respect. She finally understood what had been broken between us, and while the understanding couldn't repair everything, it was a beginning, a real one, built on acknowledgement rather than assumption. "Thank you," I said, my voice catching slightly. "This is perfect." She smiled, and for the first time in years, it felt like we were seeing each other as equals. Two separate people with separate identities, capable of loving each other without one consuming the other. I moved to New York 2 weeks later. My apartment was small but filled with light, located in a neighbourhood where artists and writers gathered in cafes to discuss their work. I decorated it with care, art on the walls, plants on the windowsill, and, on my dresser, a collection of perfume bottles I'd curated over the years. Each one told a story, evoked a memory, represented a choice I'd made for myself. The crystal bottle Emma gave me sat in the centre of the collection. I filled it with a custom blend I'd created. Notes of jasmine and amber, cardamom and leather, vanilla and smoke. It smelled like confidence and solitude, like a woman who'd learned to take up space without apology. Complex and unforgettable and entirely mine. I wore it every day. Sometimes, when I caught the scent on my own skin, I thought about the life I'd lived before, the years spent invisible, the quiet death, the mysterious rebirth. I didn't understand why I'd been given a second chance, didn't know if it was grace or magic, or simply the desperate hope of a dying mind, creating one less vivid dream. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that I'd used it. I'd chosen differently. I'd refused to disappear. My MFA program was rigorous and demanding. I worked with artists whose vision challenged and inspired me. I created pieces that pushed boundaries, that made people uncomfortable, that insisted on being noticed. My thesis project explored themes of visibility and erasure, using scent as a medium to represent presence. How we mark our existence in the world, how we claim space, how we assert our right to be remembered. Emma called occasionally. We talked about her work, about my work, about our parents' gradual adjustment to having 2 daughters who both demanded to be seen. She'd transferred to a better school, was working on developing her own authentic voice as an artist. She never asked to borrow my things anymore. She'd learned to build her own collection, to develop her own style, to stand on her own without using me as scaffolding. The conversations were real now. We disagreed sometimes. We challenged each other. But there was respect there, a mutual recognition that hadn't existed before. On the first anniversary of my move to New York, she sent me a photo. It was from a professional shoot she'd done, a portfolio piece for an exhibition. She stood alone in the frame, confident and radiant, wearing an expression of genuine self-possession. The caption read, "Finally figured out my own signature scent. It doesn't photograph the same as yours, but that's okay. I'm learning that different is good too, that I don't need to copy anyone else to be enough." I smiled and saved the photo. Then I walked to my window, looked out at the city spread below, and felt the perfume on my skin, my scent, my choice, completely and irrevocably mine. This was my life. Not the shadow of someone else's story, not the background of someone else's photograph, but my own narrative written in my own hand. I died once from being invisible. I'd been reborn into visibility, and now I lived fully, deliberately, in the space I'd reclaimed. The evening light turned golden across the buildings. I breathed in the scent of jasmine and smoke, of confidence and hard-won peace. Somewhere in the city, 1,000 other people were living their own stories, making their own choices, wearing their own armor. I was one of them now, not special, not tragic, just finally, completely myself. I closed my eyes and let the satisfaction settle into my bones. This was victory, not revenge, not triumph over others, but the quiet, profound power of becoming visible to yourself first and letting everything else follow from that foundation. My phone buzzed. A text from Jessica, my old roommate. "Gallery opening tonight. You coming?" "Yes," I typed back. "I'll be there." I moved away from the window and checked my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was strong, self-possessed, uncompromising. She wore her scent like armor, and her confidence like a crown. She was everything I'd died without becoming and been reborn to claim. When I opened my eyes again, the city was lit with streetlights and possibility. I grabbed my bag and headed for the door, ready to move through the world as someone who took up space without apology, who created beauty on her own terms, who wore fragrances nobody else could copy because they were distilled from the essence of a hard-won self. Tomorrow, I'd continue my thesis work. Tomorrow, I'd meet with my advisor. Tomorrow, I'd live another day of this reclaimed life. But tonight, I walked through Manhattan wearing my signature scent and knew with perfect certainty that I would never be invisible again. The perfume I wore was mine. The space I occupied was mine. The story I was writing belonged to me alone. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.